This is the Auburn Podcast. Zach Blackerby and Painter Sharpless here with you on a Monday.
It's a Monday.
What a Monday it is. Last time we talked, there had never been an AAF game. Now there has been 4. And I'm shocked how excited people are for it. I'm cool with it. More football, the better. And we're going to talk about the Iron because a lot of Auburn people, I'm shocked how many Auburn people care about the Birmingham Iron because of former Auburn players on there. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But just the whole premise of the league is interesting. I think it's a bit hypocritical at times, both from the AAF's point of view and from football fans' point of view. But regardless, it had a successful opening weekend from a rating standpoint. So we'll see how it goes from here.
People seem interested. I think the way that they, mix things up in terms of region and former players with only 8 teams, they did a nice job of, I think, trying to get people to buy into the team, whether that be through former college players or, of course, just where they're located because there isn't a professional team there. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed it. I'm with you. I think most of us enjoyed the idea of having what appears to be year-round football if something like this were to stick. And it's interesting because the Canadian Football League's fine quality football. It's not the NFL, but they're professionals. But no one seems to really have a lot of skin in the game. And I wonder if this league, if it can stay afloat, it becomes more popular. And if that's the case, then maybe people feel like they do have a reason to buy in. They do have a reason to care. I think right now people are just excited to have some football to watch and some guys that they represent their team, their college team.
Right. So Ryan White, the former Auburn defensive back, he was also the holder, was responsible for some 2-point plays back when Auburn was aggressive and went for 2. Those were the days. But he also interned here at the Auburn Network family of stations, so shout out to him. It was kind of cool because he interned here at the same time. I was actually working part-time here at the time, and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And it's just weird. I came in and sat next to that dude for 2 hours every day, and I'm like, dude, you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He's like, yeah, it's kind of awesome. I'm like, I bet, man. I bet. And I loved it because he didn't give the whole, it's not a big deal kind of thing. And he was like, no, this is so cool. This is one of the best things to ever happen to me. Yeah, that's cool, man.
If I was on Sports Illustrated, I, too, would be freaking out just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that was a neat experience. How about Trent Richardson? Salvaging what otherwise wasn't the best day. The Iron got it done in the fourth quarter, put some distance between them.
Yeah, Trent Richardson with 2 touchdowns. But it's guys like that, though. If you're going to say it's a developmental league, it's like no one is going to sign Trent Richardson.
Yeah, his
no one
NFL
in the NFL
is over.
Yeah, but whatever. And you can't. And they say it's a developmental thing, and then one of the starting quarterbacks on their first game is Matt Sims. It's like a 30-year-old quarterback. It's just like, what are you trying to do here? And I understand part of it is you want to win now kind of thing, but I don't know. Quan Bray returned 4 punts for the Iron, former Auburn Tiger, totaling 32 yards. And let's see, Chris Davis, maybe you've heard of him, which we had a hard time recalling, a defensive back who wore number 11 a few weeks ago. And hey, props to you guys for calling us out on it. But he did. Yeah, he's on IR. And then let's see, there's a lineman too. Who am I thinking? Avery Young. Avery Young's there, and then Trevon Reed is playing defensive back as well. So that is your Auburn representation. It's fun, and I think folks will go to Birmingham. I know some of our friends that we work with here, them and some of their family are going up to the game this weekend. It's that'll be cool. I think people will make the trek to go up to good old Legion Field, but I don't know, man. I'm just not fully sold on it. People want to watch scoring and people want to watch offense, and it's I'm fascinated by the phenomenon that there's 6 billion people in the world, and there's not 25 good quarterbacks, and you need quarterback play for football to be interesting in this day and age. You just do, and I think Spurrier helped cover up that Gilbert kid's ability, and he threw to open guys, and still, kids were dropping passes. They only had 1 preseason game, which is cool, whatever, so they're going to be sloppy. They're not going to be crisp. But it's every play, it's oh, that's why that guy's not in the NFL. Oh, that's why he's not in the NFL.
the quality should, you're right, be better than a college game, but it didn't always feel that way.
I agree. I mean, it felt like a preseason game to me.
And that's fine, because I think you're right. This is, I mean, in many ways, they're still ironing out some of the details.
Nice.
These are
ironing it out.
That you would think were some of the best college players at one point. I mean, they had a chance to play professionally. Some of them did play professionally.
Right.
And it did feel sloppy at times. Now, I'm willing to give it time. I think the quarterback play is a good point. That's something you brought up off air. And I think it's a good point. Like, if you want exciting football, you need to have talented quarterbacks. And like you said, some of the guys that are out there, I don't think that they're as good as some of the guys probably trying to get on rosters in the NFL. And that's, that may be a money issue, because I was confused. I had not heard a number for what these guys are being paid. Someone said $80,000.
Yeah,
and then health insurance.
Yeah, so every player signed a 3-year deal. The first year is 70, the second year is 80, the third year is 100. Which
I think is pretty great.
Yeah, none of it's guaranteed. They are able to leave and go to the NFL. They are not able to go to another league. So when the XFL comes out, they cannot leave the league and go to the XFL. But, if you're overshooting it, they're working 6 months out of the year and they're clearing 70 or 80 and 100K. I mean, that's a good gig. You're making $250,000. You're making $250,000 million over 3 years, and you're only working half of that. And that's overshooting it. It's only 10-week season. So good for them. I don't know if it's worse CTE, but I don't blame them for doing it, because they're doing it to pursue a bid in the NFL. So good for them.
Do you think it's something 5 years from now we're still excited about?
No, but I think it exists. But I don't think we're excited about it.
Okay. Because arena football, I think, to the surprise of many, it does still exist. You just probably don't know that it exists.
Right. I mean, this is getting national coverage. I think people want it to succeed, but... All right, so welcome on into the Auburn podcast. And, really the reason we're talking about that is because there's not a whole lot of Auburn football-related things. And we kind of, talked about, do we want to talk about basketball or some other things coming up? But I don't know. After recapping the basketball game on Saturday with you on After the Game, it's just really disappointing how this team is playing. I mean, Auburn basketball, you asked a question that I think is what people want to ask, but they don't really want to ask it because they don't want to know the answer. Do you know which question I'm referring to that you asked me?
Is the team slightly above average, but not? They haven't really taken the step forward we expected them to.
Yeah, so it's like, is this just what this team is? And I think the proof's in the pudding at this point. It's like, is this team great? No, I don't think it's what it was a year ago. Now, can it be? Yeah, and I think you're waving that flag more than anybody. Like, from a talent standpoint, this team should be so much better. They don't have a guy. They don't have a Mustafa. And, even when Bryce and Jared are playing well, it's when Bryce and Jared play well and they still lose is when I'm like, this team doesn't have that it factor that you need it to.
I'm concerned with some of the mistakes they made because they continue to come up. It's not that I don't think this team is capable. In fact, I think Bruce Pearl said this at the beginning of the season. This team probably better than the team last year. Now, fans are likely to disagree with that at this point when you look at the result. But he said he thought the conference was better, that there's a chance that they would be better as a team but lose more games. And they've done that. When you look at the game on Saturday, to me, it's pretty easy to see why they lost. They outshot their opponent. However, they turned the ball over 19 times to their opponent's 11, and I believe the offensive rebounds favored LSU to the tune of 12, and second chance points to the tune of 29-1.
Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous.
So anyway, I guess I say all that in saying Auburn is capable of scoring a lot of points. We've seen them play good defense, at least through stretches of non-conference play, and then for a 3-game stretch at home against some weaker opponents, mind you. I mean, Florida's middle of the pack. Missouri and Alabama, we could argue about where they stand, but no one's convinced that those are teams that are threats to make runs in the tournament. And so I just need to see them play cleaner basketball, play consistent defense, and not get pounded on the boards.
Right. if you're listening to this and you're one of those folks that are complaining about officiating, please stop. Please stop it. I had several people reach out to me over the course of the weekend and say, SEC refs are horrible, which I'm not disagreeing there, but Auburn did not lose the game Saturday because of the call on Wiley at the end. That is not why they lost. And I just want these. I saw some Auburn folks complaining about that, and I saw a tweet that was getting retweeted and quote tweeted like crazy saying Auburn could lose out and this season and still be better, one of the better seasons in the past 10 years.
Very correct.
I just if you want the culture around basketball to be great, if you truly want Auburn to be a basketball school, you can't have either of those mindsets.
Yeah, and the thing about the Auburn's basketball team losing out and still it being an okay season, that's not wrong. It's just that your bar is low. So I wouldn't measure your bar, your previous teams that have just been bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that bar is too low, and then last year's team, that bar is too high. Now, where is it in between there? Like, I genuinely do not know, and I think we're going to have to see how Bruce reloads with this roster over the next 3 seasons, and it looks like he's prepared to do so. There's some talented big dudes coming in. But as far as this year, man, like I just don't see it. Now, they could get hot right when the tournaments start at the end of the year, and it's like, okay, cool, but I don't know if you're going to disagree with me here because we talked about it after the game off the air, but if they don't win all the games that they're supposed to win as they finish out the season, like they're not a lock for the tournament.
I think that they will do that, but yeah. I get your point. Like, but with their current win-loss record, you're right. There's a case to be made completely that if they, how many games do we have left? 6.
I'm pulling up the schedule right now.
And by the way, I misstated something a moment ago. LSU out-rebounded Auburn on the offensive boards, not by about 10 or 12.
Yeah, I think you said 12.
By 15, 22-7. Overall, it was 12. 47 rebounds for LSU, 35 for Auburn. Turnovers 19-11. So Auburn shot nearly 50% from the field. LSU shot less than 40% from the field. Mm-hmm. And the Tigers shot 9% better from 3, 42-33%. But
yeah, so there's 8 games left.
All right.
And while I believe Auburn takes care of Ole Miss, they beat Vandy, they beat Arkansas, they beat Georgia, and then let's see, moving on to March. This is loading slow. Alabama, I think, is in there, and
Alabama's tricky because
Georgia.
They play so well at Coleman.
And then Tennessee's the third one. Yeah, right.
That's like I think Auburn wins most of their home games remaining.
But yeah, but even if they win all of the ones they're supposed to and lose to Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee, like I think they are in. But if they go on another skid and they lose, they get swept by Ole Miss, and then maybe they lose to Georgia or maybe they lose to Arkansas or something. It's like I don't think it's a given at that point.
And I feel good about Auburn taking care of those home games because of their last 2 years. They've lost 2 games in the last 2. Been one of the best home teams in college basketball, up there with teams like Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't want these teams where you're playing the bottom third of your conference late in the season, and it's like those games shouldn't be important, but they are now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's some added pressure to win those games, but you look at Auburn against Ole Miss. I like their chances at home. Vanderbilt's one of the worst teams in the conference. Oddly enough, I don't feel good about that game because Vanderbilt has not gotten over the hump, but they have played above their standard against some good teams like Kentucky and Tennessee at home.
Right.
And they actually played well So anyway, I say all that to say that Auburn should beat Vanderbilt, but I feel a little uneasy about it. And then Arkansas has a first rounder on their team, and going into the weekend, they'd won 3 straight just like Auburn had. And then you have to go to Rupp, which, kind of feels like a loss. It's going to be hard to go to Rupp against one of the teams that's been playing some of its best basketball over the last 6 weeks in Kentucky and feel good about getting a win. Georgia's bad. Mississippi State's not a given, but it's at home. And then Alabama plays you tough in Coleman. So, again, I hear your point in that Auburn does need to take care of business at home. I think they will, but this is not a stretch where you can just look at the schedule and say, yeah, Auburn gets in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. So, all right, let's transition the conversation back to football. Is there anything going on or just kind of a talking point we just want to kind of pull out of thin air? I can come up with something.
Okay.
I can come up with something. Let's see. All right, let's debate. We didn't show prep this at all, so I apologize if this podcast stinks. We just let's talk about the AAF and basketball.
And we've done that.
Yes. Let's predict, who do you think will lead Auburn in receiving yards next year?
I'm going to say Seth Williams because he's the guy that I think does, I guess.
Sean Shivers. I'm kidding. I just like saying that.
Now, the thing with Seth is, like, how many times is he going to get targeted? Because you had a guy like Ryan Davis over the last 2 years, especially in 2017, who didn't have the yards per catch, but he got hit the volume of the quantity of receptions he had made up for it.
Yeah, like what are his targets in that market share? Like, what does that look like?
And I've been bragging about how deep this wide receiver class is and saying that not getting George Pickens was an absolute blow for Auburn in a number of ways. But of all position groups, it was one of the better ones to miss out on because you've got depth and experience there. You've got some young talent and some guys coming back. But to my point of saying all that is, can Seth Williams garner enough catches? And I think he can.
How much better is his season next year versus Darius Slayton's from this year?
I think it's a lot better.
You think it's noticeably better?
Well, I think also Darius didn't do himself any favors with some big drops in the Mississippi State game, the Tennessee game.
Jarrett Stidham overthrowing him by 20 yards.
Yeah, that also didn't help Darius either. So I do think that Seth has a better season than Darius this year.
Yeah, so 35 catches for 670 yards. You think he does better than that?
He averaged about 20 yards per catch this season. I mean,
Seth Williams did? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How close was he to that this year? Hold on, I'm pulling up his stats. This is awesome show prep. This is so good. We are killing this right now. Man, my phone is stinking it up today. All right, he had 26 catches for 530. So, I mean, that's not like a totally, I mean, it's like one tier down, you know. So, my thing is how much are they going to use Schwartz this year? Because I think Schwartz is going to get it. Maybe not as many catches, or maybe they do give him more opportunities. I think that would be good for Auburn if Schwartz kind of almost became the Ryan Davis role. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be Eli Stove that does that. I think Will Hastings will keep that role. I think Will Hastings is going to really benefit from Bo Nix being the guy there.
And Matthew Hill. I think Matthew Hill has a role in this offense.
I forgot all about him. That's great.
There's a lot of mouths to feed. So that's an argument I think that's fair to make against Seth Williams having some of the gaudy numbers I'm talking about. But I feel like his ability to make big plays and to go up over people, he's so much more athletic than a lot of guys. He just didn't have a ton of coaching in high school. And then he got some of that once he got to Auburn. And I think pretty quickly into the season it was evident that Jarrett Stidham trusted him, which was interesting because he was so young. I mean, people talk about Nate Craig Myers leaving the program, but I was like, I think Seth Williams is doing it better than Nate Craig is.
I never got the Nate Craig hype. Like, I thought he was going to be fine. I thought he was going to be good because of like where he was in like the progression of the receivers.
I was into it, man, because of his athleticism. I was into it.
He looked the part,
right? I was into it,
but he
couldn't get open.
I mean, right, and that's more important to me. You know, like Will Hastings, I think is a better receiver than Nate Craig Myers. You know,
yeah, one of them's not nearly the athlete,
right? But one's open all the time and one isn't.
And
you know,
his quarterback finds him. So I think Seth, though, with another year, I think with a guy like that body, that athleticism, we saw flashes of it, a couple of catches where he just sort of embarrassed defenders because he was a little bit too tall and a little bit too strong. Like, give him another year of coaching, and I think that only benefits him. I know that's not exactly nuanced analysis. It's where I feel, though, he benefits, is just having basically 2 years now.
I mean, I think it's the clear answer. You know, I mean, it may not be flashy or, you know, the most appealing clickbaity response, but I think it's true. My question now to that is, because I agree with you. I mean, if I wanted to play devil's advocate, I could make an argument for Schwartz, but I agree with you. I think Seth is the guy next year. But if he's not, what's the sales pitch that Cody Burns and Malzahn, like, what do they give to these top receivers, these George Pickens-like receivers, if he goes out and he does what Darius Slayton did a year ago and had 600 or even 700, even if you just get 800 yards across like 40 or 50 catches, it's like, what else do you need, Gus? You know, like, what else do you need for that? And if he's another guy that goes through Auburn with this crazy amount of talent at wide receiver and then just doesn't get drafted high, I mean, I think that's going to hurt him. Like Darius Slayton, I think the NFL is going to like him, but they're not going to like him as much because I don't think he was used correctly at Auburn until the bowl game at the end of the year.
Well, do you think one thing that I think is a fair criticism for whatever reason, and again, these coaches know a lot more about football and scheme and the game plan and the current opponent that they're facing and why they're doing some of the tactical things they are doing. But why is it that it does seem like in some games, and I know I'm far from the only person to point this out, that there is no balance of intermediate routes? Mm-hmm. There's a guy like Ryan Davis who's pretty much your safety valve, and then you've got a bunch of guys going deep. And to me, that I don't know what I'm overlooking. I don't know what I don't know, but that doesn't seem complex to me to work in some intermediate routes.
Right. And I've talked to some scouts and I've, listened to draft podcasts where scouts and GMs and all that kind of talk about it. And Auburn's not the only school that does this, but the NFL hates it. They hate that, especially from a quarterback standpoint, because it's like, well, with Stidham, it's okay. Some teams are going to love Stidham, and some teams are going to be like, I don't know if this guy's good at quarterback or not. Like, I think he's good. I like his release. He lowers his elbow a little bit, but I don't know if you can really fault his decision making because I think they were all predetermined, and Gus told him where to go. Like, I don't think you ever really saw him progress through the play, and surely, like, at some point, if he was able to have that freedom, he would have done it at least like 5 times. And that never really happened, So, I don't know, and I know we're talking about receivers here, but, with Ryan Davis, can Ryan run a route? I think he can, but he never
really didn't have the opportunity.
Right, because he was the safety valve, and what you were just talking about.
And when you think about Darius Slayton.
Can he run a route?
He was faster than most of the people he played against.
Right, and I think he's going to test well. Agreed. I think he's going to be big. I think he's going to be fast. I think he's going to be able to jump high. And he's got cool hair, so I think all that's going to be. I think all that's going to be good. Though. I mean, he looks like an NFL wide receiver to me.
I guess I say all that to say, I hate questioning the coaches in for instance, something as specific as the routes they're running, because there's a lot of time they put into this that I haven't in terms of studying the film and what the opponent's giving them and what the strengths of the team are.
I understand, you're not trying to call it, but it doesn't work. It has when they've done that, it doesn't work, And so, I think they do know more than we do, but for whatever reason, they go to that, and it's never worked when they've done that, right?
You're saying it doesn't work when they don't use a blend of intermediate routes,
right? When they do the whole 3 go deep, one of the eligible guys blocks, and then Ryan Davis either behind the line or within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, that doesn't work.
I guess I always think about that Clemson game 2 years ago. And
it's hard to forget.
Some of that, yeah. I think when you go back and watch it, it's the line did get absolutely obliterated. Prince Tega talked to us recently, and he said it's a game he's watched at least 10 times. Arguably, I think he would say this, if I remember correctly, he did say this, his worst game he can remember. And he was in survival mode. But Jarrett Stidham did himself no favors in how he handled that pressure, holding on to the ball. So there was a lot of blame to go around. But part of the issue is
coaching staff wasn't. I mean, the play calling did not help out your guys.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Lastly, is I think a lot of the routes they ran took too long to develop, and with that good of a defensive line, they just didn't have time to run a bunch of deep routes. And so that's to me where I wonder where maybe some of my lack of knowledge of what Gus Malzahn and Chip Lindsey at the time were looking at,
right,
and their scheme versus oversimplistically saying, we'll blend intermediate routes, because that sounds easy enough to say, but getting back to the receiver part of the conversation and the pitch that Cody Burns has, because we've kind of questioned what is it that Cody, because he has done a good job recruiting players.
He's done outstanding.
I don't understand how though.
Right, I don't understand why 5-star running backs don't come to Auburn, but they're in contention for 5-star receivers. That's bizarre to me. And when Kirby was talking about with Pickens, it's dude, we're about to have you're going to play right away, and you'll play anywhere you go, but our guys are going to the NFL. And Ryan and Darius, I think they go to training camp. I don't know how high they get drafted, but it's dude, we use you and we're going to use you well. And if I'm George Pickens, we talked about it a lot. It's like, I don't understand why you would go to Auburn. Now, if you're a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a corner, a safety, really any position but wide receiver or tight end, I would totally get the argument of why you would go to Auburn. But if you are a top guy, and it's like, and obviously it depends what's important to you, but if you want to go to the league, go to a place that is consistently putting receivers into the league.
Yeah, and George Pickens, when I watch the video of him committing, doesn't look overly thrilled that he's putting on a Georgia hat.
Uh-huh.
So for Auburn fans that are reading into Auburn players' tweets that, he got paid or this and that, fine. But if you just take a step back and look at it logically, there's a lot of logical reasons for him to have gone to Georgia. You mentioned a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
The players who just left Georgia, Pickens' ability to start, like you said, really anywhere, but especially a place that's losing a lot of its receiver talent. You know what the position will look like with Jake Fromm coming back. That's still up in the air. We think Bo Nix will be the starter, but we know Jake Fromm will be the starter.
Right, especially with Fields leaving.
And then I brought this up.
Which is weird that he's eligible now.
Some people said that this shouldn't matter, but I think it does. Like, Kirby Smart will be the coach no matter what a year from now unless a scandal happens.
Okay. That
may not be the case with Gus Malzahn. And I've had people say, well, a lot of players know that there's a good chance in 4 to 5 years, if they're still on the team, their coach may not be there. But I still think that matters when you're going in to sign. Like, if you know you're entering a situation in which the coach is on a hot seat, that has to weigh in on the decision.
Yeah, and I think Gus is Auburn's coach for a while. I think for at least the next 2 seasons. But I understand, like, who's more likely to be the head coach for longer at their respective schools. I mean, the answer is Kirby. So I agree with you there.
Anyway, I say all that to say, like, George's pick was controversial, and Auburn fans aren't going to like it. But it makes a lot of sense in my mind why he chose Georgia, even though it was kind of sketchy, I think.
You can follow Painter on Twitter at PaintSharpless. He is also on the lunch break every day on ESPN 106.7 from 11 to 1. Thank you, bud.
Ta-ta.
You can follow me on Twitter at ZBlackerby. And the Auburn Podcast is on all of the social medias. Just search Auburn Podcast. We will be back sometime later this week. This has been the Auburn Podcast.